The Galactic Council called an emergency session 6 months after the formation of the Outer Reach Alliance. The alliance had grown to include 47 species. Not large empires or wealthy civilizations, but forgotten peoples who suddenly had a voice. The council was not pleased. The Thraxi Empire led the opposition. Their representative, a massive being covered in armored plates, stood before the council and spoke with barely controlled anger. "Humanity is destabilizing the established order," the Thraxi said. "They're collecting weak species and calling it an alliance. They are encouraging discontent among populations that were previously manageable. This cannot be allowed to continue." The Commercial Confederacy agreed. Earth's economic model is unsustainable. They are providing aid without proper compensation. They are undermining legitimate business relationships. Several of our client species have broken contracts to join this alliance. This represents significant financial losses. Even the Zenari, usually philosophical and peaceful, expressed concern. While we appreciate humanity's compassionate intentions, we worry they are creating unrealistic expectations among less developed species. Not every problem can be solved. Not every species can be saved. Sometimes acceptance is wiser than resistance. The Council imposed sanctions on Earth and the Outer Reach Alliance. Trade restrictions, diplomatic isolation, denial of access to Council facilities and jump gates. The message was clear: fall in line or be crushed. Earth's response came from Ambassador Chen, Admiral Chen's mother. She stood before the Council with the dignity of her 30 years of service. "We understand your concerns," she said calmly. "You see us as disruptive, as naive, as dangerous to the order you have maintained for centuries. Perhaps you are right. But let me ask you something. When the Varani called for help, where were you? When the Kikshari suffered under debt slavery, where was your justice? When refugee fleets drifted through space dying slowly, where was your compassion?" She paused, letting the silence grow. "You had reasons, of course. Economics, politics, practicality. But those people are still dead or suffering because of your very reasonable decisions. So yes, we are disrupting your order, because your order left too many people behind. The sanctions held. Earth and the Outer Reach Alliance found themselves isolated from the galaxy's power centers. Trade became difficult. Resources became scarce. The established powers waited for the alliance to collapse under economic pressure. But something unexpected happened. The alliance species began helping each other. The Varani shared their crystalline computing technology with human engineers, creating hybrid systems that were faster and more efficient than anything the Council species used. The Chikshari industrial techniques combined with human innovation produced ships that were cheaper to build and more reliable. The methane breathers provided access to rare elements that had always been too difficult to harvest. Each species contributed what they could. Some offered technology, some offered raw materials, some offered knowledge or labor or simply their determination to survive. Together, they built something that none of them could have built alone. Within a year, the Outer Reach Alliance was not just surviving, it was growing stronger. New species joined every month. Scientists shared research freely instead of hoarding it. Engineers collaborated across species barriers. The alliance was not rich in the way the Council understood wealth, but it was rich in cooperation and innovation. The Thraxi Empire made their move after 18 months. They gathered a fleet and announced they were conducting military exercises near Alliance space. The threat was obvious: submit or be destroyed. Admiral Chen, now commanding the Alliance Defense Forces, received the news calmly. She had been preparing for this. The Alliance had been building ships using combined technologies: human weapon systems, Varani computational power, Kiksari manufacturing efficiency. They had trained together, learning each other's strengths. When the Thraxi fleet arrived expecting easy victory, they found something they had not anticipated. The Alliance fleet was smaller, but it moved with coordination that should have been impossible between so many different species. Ships covered each other's weaknesses. Tactics adapted in real time using Varani processing speed. Weapons targeted with precision that came from genuine cooperation. The battle lasted 6 hours. It was brutal and terrible and neither side won decisively, but the Thraxi fleet withdrew. For the first time in centuries, the mighty Thraxi Empire had been fought to a standstill by species they had considered weak and worthless. The galaxy watched in shock. The impossible had happened. The forgotten species had stood against a major power and survived. More importantly, they had fought not as separate species but as one unified force. Human ships had died protecting Varani vessels. Kixari captains had sacrificed themselves to save human crews. The Alliance fought together because they had built something together. The Battle of the Outer Reach, as it came to be called, changed everything. The Galactic Council could no longer ignore the Alliance. They could no longer pretend that the old order was stable. Species across the galaxy looked at what had happened and asked themselves questions they had not asked in centuries. What if we did not have to accept how things are? What if there was another way? The Council called for negotiations, not because they wanted to, but because they had to. The Alliance had proven it could defend itself. More species were joining every week. The old powers were losing influence, and they knew it. The Treaty of New Beginnings was signed 3 months after the battle. The Outer Reach Alliance was formally recognized as an independent power bloc with full Council representation. The sanctions were lifted. Most importantly, the Council began reforms. Minimum standards for member species treatment, humanitarian intervention protocols, economic assistance programs for struggling civilizations. Were the reforms perfect? No. Did they solve every problem? No, but they were a start, and they happened because humanity had proven that another way was possible. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Wanderer, now the flagship of the Alliance fleet. She had aged in the 3 years since they first answered the Varani call. She had scars from the battles. She had lost friends and crew members, but she had also seen impossible things become real. A message came through from Earth. Command wanted to know what the Alliance's next mission would be. There were always more problems, always more species in need, always more calls for help that others would ignore. Her tactical officer, a Varani named Sharka, brought her the latest reports. There is a species in the Corward Arm. Their sun is going nova. The Council says they are too far away to help, that it would be too expensive. Sound familiar? Chen smiled. It was a tired smile, but genuine. How many ships do we have available? 15 Alliance vessels can be ready within a week. 20 if we wait 2 weeks. Tell them we're coming, Chen ordered. All of them. Humans, Varani, Kixari, everyone. Let's show them what this Alliance can do. Across the galaxy, on forgotten worlds and unloved systems, species facing impossible odds looked up at the stars. Some faced dying suns. Some faced wars or plagues or slow extinction. Some faced problems that seemed too big to solve. But now when they sent their desperate messages into the void, they had hope that someone might answer, because humanity had proven something the galaxy had forgotten. That compassion was not weakness. That helping others made you stronger, not weaker. That the species you saved today might stand beside you tomorrow. That the bonds built through sacrifice were stronger than any built through profit or fear. The old powers still did not understand. They still calculated everything in terms of cost and benefit. They still saw kindness as foolishness, but their calculations were missing something important. They were not accounting for the fact that humans were stubborn. That humans believed impossible things could become possible if you tried hard enough. That humans would answer calls for help even when it made no sense to do so. The Wanderer prepared for its next mission. The crew was ready. The ship was as prepared as it could be. But before they jumped to faster-than-light travel, Admiral Chen made an announcement to the entire Alliance fleet. 3 years ago, we heard a call for help that everyone else ignored. We answered because it was right. Today, someone else is calling. The galaxy still thinks we're naive. They still think we'll learn to be like them. They're wrong. We're going to keep answering these calls. We're going to keep standing up when others sit down. We're going to keep proving that there's a better way to live among the stars. She paused, looking at the faces on her bridge. Human and Varani and Kixari and a dozen other species all working together. That's what this Alliance is. That's what humanity brought to the galaxy. Not superior weapons or advanced technology. Just the simple belief that when someone asks for help, you answer. Let's go prove it again. The fleet jumped into the dark. Behind them, the Outer Reach Alliance continued to grow. Ahead of them, another dying world waited for rescue. And all around them, the galaxy was slowly, reluctantly, learning that humanity had changed the rules. Not through conquest or wealth or superior power, but through something much simpler and much more powerful. Through answering calls that others ignored. Through standing with the forgotten. The human fleet arrived in coalition space like a storm. One moment the sensors showed empty void. The next, 120 warships materialized in perfect formation. Trelevik watched from the observation deck of the diplomatic station. His breath caught in his throat. The ships were wrong. Coalition vessels were smooth and beautiful. designed as much for aesthetics as function. Human ships looked like weapons with engines attached, gray hulls covered in armor plating, gun batteries bristling from every surface, point defense systems that tracked invisible targets with predator focus. These were not ships built to explore or transport. These were ships built to kill. The flagship, Indomitable, dwarfed the Coalition command vessel by a factor of 3. It moved forward slowly, deliberately. Trelovic could see weapons that the Coalition had banned centuries ago. Kinetic accelerators, plasma cannons, nuclear missile pods. Things designed not just to destroy ships but to make sure they could never be repaired. "They are here," Council Leader Vrax said beside him. His voice shook. "May the ancestors forgive us." Admiral Chen granted permission for Coalition observers to board the Indomitable. Trelovic led the delegation himself. He had to see what they had unleashed. The airlock opened and they stepped into the human ship. The difference was immediate. Coalition ships smelled of recycled air and cleaning solutions. The Indomitable smelled of metal and oil and something else, something sharp that Trelovic recognized from ancient records. Gunpowder Commander Webb met them in the docking bay. He was tall for a human, built like a soldier. His uniform was plain and functional. No decoration except for rank insignia and a ribbon that Trelovic later learned meant Webb had killed enemies in hand-to-hand combat. The human smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "Welcome aboard," Webb said. "The Admiral is preparing a tactical briefing." "This way." They followed him through the corridors. Everywhere Trelovic looked, he saw things that disturbed him. Human crew members wore sidearms, small guns on their belts, just part of their uniform. On Coalition ships, weapons were locked in armories. Here, everyone was armed. Soldiers marched past in full combat gear, heading to training exercises. Their boots made sharp sounds on the metal floor. Like drum beats, like war drums, the briefing room was spare and efficient. No art on the walls, just tactical displays showing vector positions and human fleet formations. Admiral Chen stood at the head of the table. She was smaller than Trelovic expected, older than most Coalition commanders, but her eyes were hard and calculating. She looked at the Coalition delegation the way a scientist might study bacteria. "Thank you for coming," Chen said. Her voice was polite but cold. "Commander Webb will brief you on our operational plans." Webb activated the display. Trelovic watched the battle plans unfold and felt his blood go cold. The humans planned to hit vector staging areas with overwhelming force. No warning, no attempt at communication, just pure violence. They would target supply lines, destroy logistics hubs, and eliminate any vector forces they encountered. The word Webb used was exterminate. "What about prisoners?" asked diplomat Senna, a gentle being from the peaceful worlds. "What about surrender protocols?" Webb looked at her like she had spoken a foreign language. "The vector do not take prisoners. They consume every living thing they encounter. Why would we offer them mercy they never show?" "Because we are better than them," Senna said, her voice shaking. "Because we follow the rules of civilized warfare." "There are no rules in war," Chen said quietly. "There is only survival. You asked for Deathworlders to save you. This is what Deathworlders do. We fight, we win. We do whatever is necessary to protect our people and now, by extension, yours." The briefing continued. Webb described boarding actions: close quarters combat in vector hive ships, chemical weapons for clearing infested stations, scorched earth tactics to deny the enemy resources. Every strategy made the Coalition representatives more uncomfortable. These were not the tactics of liberators. These were the tactics of exterminators. After the briefing, Chen invited the delegation to dinner in the officers' mess. It was meant as a gesture of friendship. It went badly. Human food was aggressive. Spices that burned, meat from animals that had been killed specifically for eating. The Coalition delegation picked at their plates while human officers ate with enthusiasm. The conversation was worse. Marines told stories of combat like they were discussing sports. They laughed about close calls and narrow escapes. They talked about the best ways to breach fortified positions. They debated the effectiveness of different weapons with the passion of artists discussing techniques. To them, violence was normal, natural, even entertaining. Lieutenant Rodriguez sat across from Trelovic. She was young for a senior officer, with scars on her hands and arms. She noticed him staring at the scars and smiled. "Mars Rebellion," she said. "Took a blast from a mining charge. Stupid mistake. I learned from it." "You fight your own people?" Trelovic asked, horrified. "Sometimes," Rodriguez shrugged. "Colonies wanted independence. got violent about it. We had to put it down. It happens. Humans fight.
It is what we do, but why?
Trelvik could not understand. Why is violence so common in your culture? Rodriguez thought about it. Our world is hard, she said finally. Not like yours. We have predators, diseases, natural disasters. We had to fight every day just to survive. That shapes a species, makes us tough, makes us dangerous. We evolved to compete, to dominate, to win. You evolved on peaceful worlds. We evolved on a world that wanted to kill us. She paused, looking at him with something like pity. You asked what we are. We are what our world made us. Survivors, fighters, killers when we need to be. And right now you need killers. Trelvik left the dinner early. He made his excuses and returned to the coalition station. The other delegates came with him, all looking shaken. They gathered in the observation lounge and watched the human fleet through the windows. The ships hung in space like sleeping predators. Waiting. They are monsters, Senna whispered. We have invited monsters to save us. Yes, Trelvik agreed. But they are our monsters now. And perhaps monsters are what we need. He thought about Rodriguez and her casual discussion of violence, about Webb and his battle plans that treated enemy lives as simple math, about Chen and her cold eyes that had seen too much death. These were not people who had been forced into war. These were people who understood war as naturally as breathing. It was in their blood, in their culture, in the way they thought about the universe. The coalition had evolved in peace. They had built civilizations based on cooperation and understanding. They had banned weapons and outlawed violence and created a society of incredible beauty. Then the Vector had come, and all that beauty meant nothing against teeth and claws and hunger. Humans had evolved differently. They had not banned violence. They had perfected it. They had spent their entire history fighting nature, fighting each other, getting better at it with every generation. They had turned war into an art and science. And now the coalition would benefit from that terrible expertise. Trelvik received a message from Chen. The human fleet would move out in 12 hours. They had located a Vector staging area near the colony of Thessia Prime. The planet was already fallen, its population consumed. But the Vector were using it to launch attacks on surrounding systems. Chen planned to destroy them before they could spread further. The message was polite, professional, but Trelvik could read between the lines. Chen was not asking permission. She was informing him of what would happen. The humans would fight their way, by their rules. The coalition could watch or not, but they would not stop the Deathworlders from doing what Deathworlders did best. Trelvik looked out at the human fleet one more time. Tomorrow, those ships would enter combat. Tomorrow, the galaxy would see what humanity really was. He wondered if the coalition would ever be able to look at humans the same way after that. He wondered if humans would look at themselves the same way, but most of all, he wondered what they had become by asking for this help. What did it mean when peaceful species needed monsters to protect them? What did it say about the universe they lived in? He had no answers, only fear, and a terrible certainty that nothing would be the same after tomorrow. The human fleet did not wait for coalition approval. 12 hours after arriving, they jumped to Thessia Prime. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the tactical display as her ships dropped out of FTL. The planet appeared on screen, beautiful and dead. Cities that had once held millions now stood empty. Vector hive ships orbited above, feeding on what remained. Enemy contacts, the sensor officer reported. 23 hive ships. Multiple smaller craft. They have detected us and are forming defensive positions. Chen smiled. It was not a kind expression. They think defense will help them. Show them they are wrong. All ships attack pattern Delta, no mercy, no prisoners. Complete destruction. The fleet moved forward. Coalition observers on the trailing support ships watched in awe and horror as the human ships accelerated to combat speed. They moved in formation, each vessel covering the others. Perfect coordination. The result of thousands of hours of training. The Vector had numbers. Humans had discipline. The first shots came from extreme range. Human railguns spat metal at incredible velocities. No energy signatures to track. No warning. Just solid slugs traveling at a fraction of light speed. 3 Vector ships exploded before they even knew they were under attack. The organic hulls could not handle kinetic impacts at that velocity. They simply came apart. The Vector returned fire. Bioplasma weapons that had destroyed Coalition fleets hit human shields and armor. The ships took damage but kept coming. They were built to absorb punishment. Coalition vessels would have broken apart under that barrage. Human ships just powered through. Close to weapons range, Commander Webb ordered. All batteries, open fire. The human fleet lit up like a star-going nova. Every weapon fired at once, missiles, plasma cannons, particle beams, conventional explosives, even nuclear warheads. Things the Coalition had banned for being too cruel. Humans used them without hesitation. The space between the fleets became a storm of fire and death. Vectar ships died by the dozen. Their organic armor, which had resisted Coalition weapons, burned under the sustained human assault. Chen watched the battle unfold with cold satisfaction. This was what humans were good at. This was what 200 years of isolation had prepared them for. They were not diplomats or explorers. They were warriors. And war was what they knew. But the Vectar were not helpless. They adapted quickly, focusing their fire on individual human ships. The destroyer Relentless took critical damage. Its shields failed. Bioplasma burned through the hull. Chen watched the crew counts drop as sections were breached. 70 dead. 100. The ship was dying. Relentless is falling out of formation, Webb reported. Captain Torres requests permission to evacuate. Denied, Chen said. Tell Torres to ram the nearest hive ship. Make his death count. Webb hesitated only a second. Then he relayed the order. The Relentless changed course, aiming directly at a Vectar hive ship twice its size. The Coalition observers watching from their safe distance gasped. This was insane. This was murder. Torres was killing his own crew. But the human captain obeyed without question. The Relentless hit the hive ship at full speed. The impact was catastrophic. Both vessels exploded in a ball of plasma and debris. 400 humans died. Thousands of Vectar died. Chen marked it in her log as an acceptable trade. This was the calculus of war. Lives were numbers. Deaths were statistics. Victory was the only thing that mattered. The battle raged for 3 hours. By the end, the Vectar fleet was destroyed. 23 hive ships reduced to wreckage. Hundreds of smaller craft eliminated. The humans had won, but the cost was high. 7 ships lost, 3,000 dead. The surviving vessels were battered and scarred. They had won through pure brutality, through willingness to die, through tactics no civilized species would use. Secure the orbit, Chen ordered. Prepare boarding teams. I want every Vectar facility on that planet destroyed. Lieutenant Rodriguez led the first wave. Her Marines dropped in armored pods, hitting the planet's surface like meteorites. The Vectar had established hives in the ruins of Coalition cities. Organic structures grown from the bones of the dead. Rodriguez felt no sympathy. She felt nothing but determination to complete her mission. The boarding pods opened and the Marines poured out. They moved through the ruins in squad formation, weapons tracking targets. The Vectar came at them in waves. Soldier forms bred for combat, fast and deadly. They had destroyed Coalition ground forces easily. They met humans and learned the difference. Human soldiers were different. They wore powered armor that made them stronger and faster. They carried weapons that could punch through organic armor like paper. They moved with precision and purpose. When a Marine went down, 2 more took his place. They did not panic. They did not retreat. They just kept fighting. Rodriguez cleared a hive entrance with a grenade launcher. The explosion collapsed the tunnel. Vector warriors inside were buried alive. She marked the location and moved to the next target. Behind her, engineers set demolition charges. They would destroy the entire hive structure. Leave nothing that could regenerate. This was not about winning. This was about making sure the enemy could never come back. Coalition cameras recorded everything. The footage was broadcast back to Lumina Prime. Billions watched as human soldiers fought with a ferocity they had never imagined. The Marines showed no fear, no hesitation. They moved through hell like they were built for it. Because in a way they were. Earth had made them hard. Evolution had made them predators. Now they were hunting. The ground campaign lasted 2 days. Rodriguez and her Marines systematically destroyed every Vectar presence on Thessia Prime. They used chemical weapons to clear deep hives. They used flamethrowers to sterilize breeding chambers. They showed the same mercy the Vectar had shown the original inhabitants of the planet. None at all. On the 3rd day, Chen received a transmission from the Coalition Command. Ambassador Trelovic appeared on her screen, looking shaken. Behind him, other delegates argued in the background. The audio was chaotic. Multiple voices raised in anger and fear. "Admiral," Trelovic said, "we must discuss your tactics. The methods you are using are considered war crimes under coalition law. The chemical weapons, the destruction of infrastructure, the deliberate killing of enemy forces trying to retreat." Chen looked at him without expression. "The Vectar were using this planet as a staging ground for attacks on your colonies. Every day we waited, more of your people would die, so we removed the threat. Completely, that requires thorough action. You destroyed an entire city to kill a few dozen Vectar," someone shouted from off-screen. "That building could have been reclaimed." "That building was infested," Chen replied coldly. "The Vectar integrate into structures. They grow, spread. The only way to be sure is complete destruction. Would you prefer I leave them alive to attack you later?" Trelovic raised his hands for calm. "Admiral, we appreciate your efforts. But there must be limits. There must be rules even in war. Otherwise, we become no better than the enemy." Chen leaned forward. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but hard as steel. "You asked us to save you. This is what saving you looks like. War is not polite. It is not civilized. It is brutal and horrible and necessary. We fight to win. If you wanted someone to fight by your rules, you should not have called Deathworlders. This is what we are. This is what we do. You do not have to like it, but you need it." The transmission ended. Chen sat back in her chair. Webb stood beside her, arms crossed. "They do not understand," he said. "They have never had to make hard choices." "No," Chen agreed. "They built a paradise and hoped nothing would ever threaten it. But the universe does not care about hope. The universe is cold and violent and full of things that want to kill you. We learned that lesson millions of years ago. They are learning it now." She pulled up the strategic map. Thessia Prime was clear. But there were dozens of other Vectar positions, hundreds of infected worlds. The war was just beginning, and the Coalition would have to watch as humans did what was necessary to win. They would have to accept that their saviors were also their monsters. Because in the end, survival mattered more than morality, and humans had always been very good at surviving. "Set course for the next target," Chen ordered. "The Vectar staging area at Beta Centauri. We move in 6 hours. Tell the fleet to prepare for heavy combat." "Yes, Admiral." The human fleet began repairs. Damaged ships were patched with temporary armor. Weapons were reloaded. Marines who had fought on the surface were rotated out for fresh troops. The machine of war prepared itself for the next battle. And the next after that, because humans understood something the Coalition did not. War was not about single victories. It was about grinding the enemy down until they could not fight back. It was about being more willing to die than they were. It was about being the last one standing. The Vectar had thought themselves unstoppable. They had crushed the Coalition forces without effort. But now they faced something they had never encountered before. An enemy that fought like they did. Without mercy. Without hesitation. Without limit. For the first time since the war began, the Vectar swarm knew fear. 6 weeks into the war, the human fleet had recaptured 4 occupied Coalition worlds. The victories came at terrible cost. Not just human lives, though those were spent freely. The real cost was measured in destroyed cities, contaminated planets, and millions of Vectar dead. The galaxy watched and wondered if they had traded one nightmare for another. Admiral Chen studied casualty reports in her ready room. 2,300 human dead, 12 ships lost or too damaged to repair. But the numbers that bothered her were different. 2 billion Vectar killed, 17 major population centers destroyed, 3 planets rendered temporarily uninhabitable by chemical weapons. The math was clear. They were winning, but winning looked a lot like genocide. Commander Webb entered without knocking. He looked tired. They all looked tired. War was exhausting even when you were good at it. "We have a situation," he said. "The Vectar Queen at Sigma Draconis is broadcasting. She wants to surrender." Chen looked up. "First time for everything. What are her terms?" "She offers to evacuate her forces from Coalition space. In exchange, we let her hive live. She has approximately 50,000 warriors under her command, plus larvae and support castes. Intelligence says the Vectar can regenerate from a single queen," Chen said. If we let her go, she rebuilds her forces in 5 years and attacks again. The Coalition learned that lesson already. This is not the first time the Vectar have offered peace. The Coalition is demanding we accept the surrender, Webb said. Ambassador Trelovic sent an urgent transmission. He says refusing violates every law of war they have. They are threatening to revoke our authorization to operate in their space. Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then she made her decision. Send word to the Coalition. We reject the surrender. Sigma Draconis will be sterilized. No survivors. Admiral, they will not accept that. They do not have to accept it. They asked us to win this war. We are winning. If they want us to stop, they can try to make us. But I do not think they will. Because deep down they know I am right. The Vectar cannot be trusted. This ends when they are gone. All of them. The attack on Sigma Draconis was methodical. The human fleet surrounded the planet. The Vectar Queen broadcast desperate pleas. She offered technology, information, complete submission. Chen listened to none of it. The bombardment began at dawn. It lasted 12 hours. By the end, nothing lived on the surface. The planet was dead. So were 50,000 Vectar who had been willing to surrender. The galaxy erupted. Coalition citizens took to the streets in protest. Demonstrations against human brutality. Calls for the fleet to be expelled. The council convened an emergency session. Trelovic stood before them, exhausted and angry. We have created monsters, he said. The humans are supposed to protect us. Instead, they commit atrocities in our name. This must stop. Council leader Vrax looked old and tired. What would you have us do? Order them to leave? The Vectar still control 30 systems. If the humans go, we will lose. Our people will die. Perhaps Admiral Chen is right. Perhaps this is what victory costs. At what point do we become as evil as our enemies? Asked Diplomat Senna. The humans are not protecting us. They are using us as an excuse to indulge their violent nature. Look at their soldiers. They enjoy this. They celebrate their kills. They compete to see who can be more brutal. These are not heroes. These are barbarians. The council argued for hours. In the end, they voted to allow the human campaign to continue. The alternative was unthinkable. But the vote was close, and the protests continued. The coalition was divided. Some saw humans as necessary saviors. Others saw them as a threat worse than the Vectar. Fear and gratitude mixed into something toxic and unstable. On the Indomitable, the mood was darker. Lieutenant Rodriguez sat in the crew lounge with other Marines. They had just returned from clearing a Vectar hive on New Harmony. The operation had been successful. It had also been ugly. They had found coalition prisoners in the hive. Still alive but being slowly consumed. The Marines had mercy killed them rather than attempt rescue. It was the kind choice. It still felt wrong. I joined to protect people, said Corporal Chen, no relation to the Admiral. Now I am not sure what we are doing. We kill everything, we destroy everything. How is that protection? Rodriguez did not have a good answer. She had been doing this job for years. She had learned to compartmentalize, to not think too hard about the people she killed or the orders she followed. But this was different. The scale was different, the brutality was different. She was starting to wonder if Webb was right, if there really were no rules in war, or if they had just stopped caring about rules. We are fighting an enemy that eats people, Rodriguez said finally. That consumes entire civilizations. The coalition tried to fight them with mercy and restraint. They lost. We are fighting them with everything we have. We are winning. Maybe that is all that matters. Is it? Corporal Chen asked. My brother back home sent me the news feeds. People are calling us war criminals, monsters. They say we are worse than the Vectar because we choose to be brutal. The Vectar are just following their nature. We know better, and do it anyway. Rodriguez had no answer to that either. She left the lounge and headed to the gym. Exercise helped. Physical pain drowned out mental confusion. She ran on the treadmill until her legs burned. Then she hit the heavy bag until her knuckles bled. It did not really help. The questions remained. Commander Webb found her there an hour later. He watched her work the bag for a moment. Then he spoke. "The Admiral wants to see you. Both of us, actually. Command briefing in 20 minutes. In Chen's ready room, the Admiral looked older than Rodriguez remembered. The war was aging everyone. Chen gestured for them to sit. "I am going to be honest with you both," she said. "We are winning this war. In another 3 months, the Vectar presence in Coalition space will be eliminated. But I worry about what comes after. I worry about what we have become." Webb frowned. "Admiral, we are doing what needs to be done. The enemy shows no mercy. We cannot afford to either." "I know," Chen said. "That is what troubles me. Every decision I have made has been tactically correct, strategically sound, but morally questionable. I ordered Captain Torres to ram his ship. I killed 50,000 surrendering enemies. I have contaminated 3 planets. All necessary. All justified by the goal of victory. But at what point does necessary become monstrous?" Rodriguez spoke carefully. "Permission to speak freely, Admiral?" "Granted." "I think you are asking the wrong question. The real question is not whether we are being too brutal. It is whether we can stop being brutal when the war is over. Can we go back to being the people we were? Or have we changed into something else? Something the galaxy should fear?" Chen looked at her for a long moment. Then she smiled sadly. "That is a very good question, Lieutenant. I wish I had an answer. My grandchildren back on Earth are growing up hearing stories about our great victories. They think we are heroes. They do not know about Sigma Draconis, about the prisoners we could not save, about the choices we make every day that haunt us at night." "They do not need to know," Webb said firmly. "We carry that weight, so they do not have to. That is what soldiers do. We do the hard things, the ugly things. We compromise our souls so others can stay innocent. It is not pretty, it is not fair, but it is necessary." "Is it?" Chen asked. "Or are we just telling ourselves that to feel better about what we have become? The Coalition was right to fear us. We are dangerous, not because we are strong or well-armed, but because we are willing to cross lines they never would. We do not flinch from atrocity. We embrace it as a tool. That makes us effective. It also makes us terrifying." The 3 of them sat in silence. Outside the window, human ships patrolled Coalition space. Inside, 3 soldiers questioned whether they were heroes or villains. The answer, Rodriguez thought, was probably both. They were saving the galaxy. They were also staining it with blood. History would judge them, but history was written by survivors, and humans were very good at surviving. "We continue the mission," Chen said finally. "We finish what we started. We win this war. Then we deal with the consequences. All of them." "Yes, Admiral," they said in unison. But as Rodriguez left the ready room, she wondered what those consequences would be. Would the Coalition accept them after the war? Would Earth welcome them home as heroes or exile them as war criminals? Would they be able to look at themselves in the mirror? She did not know. She just knew that they had come too far to stop now. The path they walked was dark and bloody, but it was the only path forward, and they would walk it to the end. 3 months after the war began, human intelligence located the Vectar homeworld. The information came from a dying queen they had captured on Kepler Station. She had traded the coordinates for a quick death. Chen granted it. Now she stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, staring at the tactical display. One planet, the source of everything. If they destroyed it, the Vectar threat would end permanently. "Preliminary scans are complete," the science officer reported. "The planet is dying. Ecological collapse. That is why the Vectar expanded so aggressively. They were running out of resources." Chen studied the data. The planet showed massive environmental damage. Stripped continents, polluted oceans. The Vectar had consumed their own world trying to survive. Then they had gone looking for others to consume. It was almost sad, almost understandable, but understanding did not change what needed to be done. "Prepare the planet killers," Chen ordered. We will crack the crust. Make sure nothing survives, Webb hesitated. That small pause made Chen look at him sharply. Commander? Is there a problem? Admiral, the Coalition has sent new intelligence. Long-range scans show civilian populations on the surface. Larvae, non-combatants. Approximately 15 billion individuals who have never left their homeworld. They are not warriors. They are just trying to survive. Chen felt something cold settle in her chest. 15 billion, not soldiers. Not the monsters that had invaded Coalition space. Just people trying to live on a dying world. People who would die screaming when the planet broke apart. Children who would never understand why death came from the sky. Show me, she said. The screen changed. High-resolution images from Coalition survey drones. Cities built into the ruins of the dead world. Vector young moving through the streets. They looked different from the warriors, smaller, less aggressive. Some of them played in the toxic dust. Others tended to the few remaining green spaces. They were children. Alien and strange, but still children. The Coalition is demanding we halt the operation, Webb continued. Ambassador Trelevic is threatening to declare us war criminals if we proceed. They are calling this genocide. It is genocide, Chen said quietly. That is exactly what it is. The question is whether it is justified genocide. Can we risk letting 15 billion Vectar live when any one of them might grow up to be the next invasion force? When their species has proven they will consume everything they touch? Admiral, a junior officer called out. We are getting emergency transmissions from multiple ships in the fleet. Several captains are refusing to fire on civilian targets. They are requesting permission to stand down. Chen felt her control slipping. The fleet was fracturing. She had pushed them too far, made them cross too many lines. Now, when it mattered most, they were refusing orders. She did not blame them. She was not sure she could give the order herself. Which ships? Webb asked, his hand moving toward his sidearm. A threat. He would enforce discipline if needed. That was what good soldiers did. But Chen raised her hand to stop him. Let them stand down, she said. Open a channel to Lieutenant Rodriguez. I need her on the bridge. Rodriguez arrived 10 minutes later. She looked exhausted. They all looked exhausted. The war had ground them down to nothing. Chen gestured to the display showing the Vectar homeworld. Tell me what you see. Rodriguez studied the images. She saw the children, the dying world, the desperation that had driven an entire species to become monsters. I see people who will die if we do what we came here to do, she said. But I also see the species that killed billions of Coalition citizens, that ate children while their parents watched, that shows no mercy and offers no quarter. I do not know what the right answer is, Admiral. I just know that if we do this, we cross a line we can never uncross. We crossed that line weeks ago, Webb said, at Sigma Draconis, at Thessia Prime. We have been crossing lines since we arrived. This is just the final one, the logical conclusion of everything we have done. We finish the job. We eliminate the threat forever. Then what was the point? Rodriguez shot back. What were we fighting for? To protect the innocent? We become mass murderers. To stop the Vectar from consuming civilizations? We destroy an entire species. The Coalition was right to fear us. We are monsters. Worse than monsters because we know what we are doing and choose it anyway. Chen's communicator chimed. Ambassador Trelevic appeared on the screen. Behind him, the entire Coalition Council watched. Billions more watched the broadcast across the galaxy. This moment would define humanity's place in the universe. Heroes or villains, saviors or destroyers. The choice was Chen's, Admiral Chen, Trelevic said. His voice shook but held firm. We were wrong to isolate your people because of your capacity for violence. We feared what you might do. We were right to fear. But we were wrong to judge. You came when we called. You fought when we could not. You bled to protect people you had never met. For that we are grateful. But this cannot stand. 15 billion innocents. We beg you. We plead with you. Show mercy. Prove that Deathworlders can be more than their nature. Chen looked at the firing controls. One button. That was all it would take. End the Vectar. End the threat. Make sure it could never happen again. The logical choice. The strategic choice. The choice that would haunt her forever. Her hand moved toward the control. Webb watched her, ready to support whatever she decided. Rodriguez watched her, silently pleading for mercy. Chen's hand stopped. She thought of her grandchildren back on Earth. Thought of the stories they would hear. Thought of what kind of galaxy she wanted them to inherit. One where strength meant destruction, or one where strength meant restraint. Her whole life had been about making hard choices. This was the hardest. But maybe for once the hard choice was also the right one. "Stand down," she said. "All weapons offline. Rodriguez, you have the con. I need to speak with the ambassador." Webb stared at her. "Admiral, we came here to end this. If we leave now, everything we did was for nothing." "No," Chen said. "If we destroy that planet, everything we did becomes meaningless. We fought to protect life, not to become death itself. There has to be another way." She turned to Trelovic. "Ambassador, I need coalition cooperation. And I need it now. We have resources you do not. Survey data from our isolated years. We found a planet 3 systems from here. Harsh, difficult, but survivable. We were going to terraform it for a mining colony. Instead, we will use it for something else." "What are you proposing?" Trelovic asked. "Evacuation and relocation? We move the Vectar to the New World. All of them. Under coalition supervision. Strict quarantine. No contact with other species. We give them a chance to rebuild their civilization away from others. Let them learn from their mistakes. In a few generations, maybe they become something different. Something that can coexist instead of consume." "That is insane," Webb said. "They will just grow strong and attack again." "Maybe," Chen agreed. "But that is a problem for future generations. Right now, we have a choice between genocide and hope. I choose hope. Even if it is foolish. Even if it is dangerous. Because if we cannot choose mercy when we have the power to destroy, then what does our power mean? We become the very monsters the Coalition feared." The next 3 weeks were chaos. Human ships worked alongside Coalition vessels to evacuate the Vectar homeworld. The operation was massive and complicated. The Vectar did not understand at first. They expected death. Instead, they got salvation. Some accepted, others fought. Rodriguez led Marines in crowd control operations, protecting Vectar from each other while they loaded onto transports. It was surreal. Weeks ago, she had killed them by the thousand. Now she protected them. The New World was harsh, rocky and cold, but it had water and atmosphere and life could survive there. The Vectar would have to work for everything. Learn to build instead of consume. Change or die. Chen hoped they would choose change. But she built weapons platforms in orbit just in case. Mercy did not mean stupidity. It meant giving someone a chance. What they did with that chance was up to them. When the evacuation was complete, Chen stood one final time on the bridge of the Indomitable. The Vectar homeworld was empty behind them. The New World held 15 billion lives that had been spared. Trelovic appeared on the screen one last time. He looked different. Older but also lighter. "Like a weight had been lifted, thank you," he said simply. "For saving us. And for saving them. And for saving yourselves from becoming what you might have been." "Do not thank us yet," Chen replied. "What we did was dangerous and possibly foolish. If the Vectar attack again in 50 years, history will judge us harshly. But at least we will be able to look ourselves in the mirror. That counts for something. Will you stay?" Trelovic asked. "The quarantine is ended. Earth is welcome in the Coalition." "You have earned that place." Chen thought about it. Thought about her grandchildren and what kind of future she wanted for them. "We will stay," she said. "But not as conquerors or saviors. As partners, equals. You need to remember what we showed you. That violence exists. That threats are real. That pacifism only works when everyone agrees to it. We will help you defend yourselves. But you need to learn to defend yourselves too. Never forget what almost happened because you were unprepared.